Come on in, pull up a chair and take a load off because today I will be sharing a how to play as well as reviewing Walking in Burano from my friends over at AEG as well as EmperorS4 games. Is this a light family game that you should run, not walk, to your friendly local game store to pick up? Or if you see this on a shelf, should you just walk on by? You'll find out right after this. Howdy, howdy, howdy. I'm Jeff McAleer, back once again as your host here at the Gaming Gang channel. As I mentioned in the open, I will be sharing how to play and reviewing Walking in Burano, which is from AEG and EmperorS4. It is designed by Wei-Min Ling with artwork provided by Meishili Chan. Hopefully I'm close on the pronunciations of those names. The game is for 1 to 4 players, ages 10 and up, plays in around 20 to 30 minutes, and does carry an MSRP of $29.99. So let's swing on over to the other camera. I will show you how to play Walking in Burano. I have everything from Walking in Burano laid out here. And essentially, the premise of the game is that in Burano, Italy, there are these homes that are these buildings that are very flashily painted. They really stand out, and they draw in a lot of tourists. So essentially what you're doing is you're kind of repairing and repainting these different buildings to be able to attract both tourists as well as inhabitants to the buildings themselves. So we've got some decks of cards. We've got 1, 2, and 3. These each contain the floors of the buildings. So we've got the first floors, we got the second floors, and we have the third floors. We also have various inhabitants that we can attract, and we have tourists that we can attract. Now, the difference between them is that you can only have one of each type of inhabitant. You can't have multiple types of inhabitants. So, for an example, here's Santa Claus. You can't have 2 Santa Clauses. You can only have one. With tourists, on the other hand, you can have more than one. Granted, there are not like tons of copies of each of these inhabitants and tourists. In fact, it's essentially you really have 2. So it's not as if every one of the players, especially if you're playing a 4-player game, can recruit a shop owner or the mayor or the policeman. There are a limited number in the supply. And of course, if you've already recruited them or actually enticed them, then they're not available to the other players. So on these cards, you're going to see there's all different things that you're going to be keeping your eye out for. First thing is the color, because you need to have each of the buildings that you build or repair, repaint, what have you, be an exact color. Now, you can break that rule. It will cost you victory points, but for the most part, you're always looking to have the same color in a row. Each of the players is going to start off with a scoring sheet. It's going to tell them what each of the tourists will score them victory points for, as well as what the inhabitants score. There are some extra inhabitants as well in this edition. So we have a chimney sweep, we've got a painter, and we also have a fisherman. So they are not on this score sheet here, but there is a couple of cards actually, which do explain these new inhabitants. So that will explain all that for you. Game is really, really easy to start playing and jump into, but there is a challenge here. There's something that you really have to pay attention to, because the way you're going to score mainly is from the characters, from the inhabitants as well as the tourists. And what will happen is each of your buildings can attract one of these specific characters. And of course, you actually get to choose who it attracts. And each of them has a specific scoring bonus for you that you have to keep an eye out on if you're looking to try to win the game. So, for an example, tourists all will actually score you points for whatever they represent for the building that they're in, right? This is considered a building. Now, this is just a layout of the available floors. I will tell you about that in just a moment and kind of start showing you how you're assembling or repairing, repainting these buildings. But the tourists will only occupy one building. The inhabitants are a bit different and they do vary a lot. For an example, Santa Claus gives you points for all the buildings you have that have chimneys. You'll have some that will be, for an example, these are street lights. The policeman scores you points for street lights that are not adjacent to each other. So if you had a street light, then nothing, and a street light, nothing, and a street light, that would be worth big points if you happen to attract the policeman. The mayor gives you points for all the people who are walking along on the first floor here. Shop owners give you points for shops. Some people the florists give you points for different kinds of plants. You get points for curtains. There's all different things going on in the game. So something they need to keep an eye on with the various different floors will be flowers, people, curtains, cats. Is it a shop? Which gives you a little victory point bonus here. Do we have the street light, street lamp, whichever you want to consider it? That is considered a closed window. That is not beautiful. That costs you victory points. You lose victory points for closed windows in your houses. Then, of course, up here we've got chimneys. We've also got more windows. We got a cat. I mean, all these different floors are all just really different. So it's a lot of fun as you're putting these buildings together. So we even have a little cat as our first player marker. So essentially what you're able to do each turn is you're going to select floors, and we have money. We also have some money down here. So you can select floors. You have to start either at the top or at the bottom when you select your floor. Depending on how many floors you select will determine how much money you get. You may not get any money. If you take one floor, you get 2 coins. If you take 2 floors, you get 1 coin. And if you take all 3 floors, then you get nothing. When you're selecting your floors, you must choose from one row. So you can't say, oh, I'm going to take this, and I'm going to take this, and then I'm going to take this. You can't do that. You have to take it from a row. You have to start from the top or the bottom when you're making your selection for floors. One thing that will happen after the first player has selected, you will find, so let's say for an example, I'm the first player and I decide, you know what, I would like to get this pink floor for a shop, and I'm just going to take 1 floor. So I would get the 1 floor, and then I get 2 coins. So once I've selected and gotten my coins, the next thing I get to do is, if I'd like, this goes in my hand. This card goes into my hand. But what I can do is I can choose to build. So each of the players are going to have 2 scaffolding cards, and they are 2 sides. So one is a ground floor that has a door, and the other is an upper floor. So what you can do is, and I'll show you in a second, but what I can decide to do is, okay, so I'm going to build this first floor. It's costing me 1 coin. So anytime you build 1 floor, the lowest floor, the lower floor, the first floor, it costs you 1 coin. If you build a second or third floor, it costs you 2 for each of those floors. So as an example, if I had Maybe I lucked out and I had a hand where my three cards are all the same color and I got first, second, and third floor. I could build that building or whatever you're actually doing, repairing, painting, whatever, all in one turn, but it would cost me 5 coins to do so. So let's say, as an example, I decide I'm going to do that. I build it, I pay my coin. That's it. That's the end of my turn. Then it moves to the next player. When we're selecting the floors, we do not restock these floors until the turn is over. So if you have 4 players, then 4 players are going to actually go through choosing their floors. And then we get to actually restock this. So as the last player, especially in a 4-player game, you're picking over some leftovers. Thankfully, each turn, the first player is going to move to the next person. So everybody, for the most part, is going to have a shot at being the first player, and they will also end up being the last player. So it all evens out. I will point out, once 5 buildings have been built by 1 player, that activates the final round. So you're going to make sure that everyone in that turn got an opportunity to play. So as an example, if it was in a 4-player game, if it was the 3rd player who's the first to build 5 buildings, then that 4th player is still going to get their turn. The 1st and 2nd player would not. So you're just making sure that everyone gets an even number of turns to be completing their buildings. So as an example, let's say, let's see what we got. Let's try to find a pink floor here. There we go. Finally. Finally. So I'm just going to cheat. I'm going to replace. Just want to give you an idea of how the game will kind of progress. I will replace that first floor. Anyway, there are some rules that you have to stick to as far as when you're building or whatever you're doing with these houses, right? So you're going to have 5 spots. So effectively, you're looking at like this, right? You're going to have 5 different spots as far as putting together these buildings. Now, you'll be able to use these scaffolds. So for an example, let's say I decided that, and I'm going to try to pull this down so we can have enough space to kind of fit this in. Let's say it came around to my turn and I decide, okay, well, I'm actually going to take these 2 floors. I'm going to take the top and the middle floors. That would get me a coin. Then I get these. So as an example, I only have 2 coins right now, but I have 2 floors that I could use. And you can only have 3 cards in your hand. You can finish your turn with 3 cards. You can't have any more than that in your hand. So you can't stockpile floors and things like that. So let's say, for an example, I just want to build the top story. I don't know why, but let's say that's what I want to do. So I could go to this pink building here. I could take my scaffold, flip it over so the door's not showing, like so, right? And then I would pay my 2 coins, and then that's what that looks like. So you don't have to necessarily build things in the exact order. You don't have to go first floor, second floor, third floor. That's what these scaffold cards are for. Because otherwise, you're really stuck with the luck of the draw of the cards for the different floors. You can be really, really stuck. So let's say, for an example, another player later on, after we're going through this, now they want to, it's their turn and they're taking floors. They could start here and they could start here because now there's no longer first floors available. So this, either the top or the bottom. So now you could take these. So that is a legal maneuver to do that. There are certain rules that you have to look at when you're putting the buildings together. Like I said, you can break them. You have 4 of these little tokens here. They're worth 3 victory points. If you spend them, you lose them. So you cannot build or have two buildings of the same color next to each other. That is a rule. And the buildings have to all be made from the same color floors. There are some rules that you can break, and when you break it one time for a building, then you're going to pay one of these. These are like building exceptions kind of things. But to be honest, you really want to try to make sure that you don't break those rules because those victory points are going to cost you in the end. So let's kind of put together some buildings here, and I will give you an example. Now, I'm cheating. Yes, I know. Let's see where we got a yellow. There we go. There we go, like so. And let's put this together like so. So now, once you've completed a building, let's say I've just completed these two buildings, I get to select either an inhabitant or a tourist to come and basically occupy these buildings. So I have to take a look to see, okay, so who does what? Who scores me what with these? And I'm going to zoom in a little bit here so we get a better look at some of these inhabitants. And you can get a better look at some of the artwork on these cards. So let's see if I can sharpen that up a little bit. There we go. That looks good. All right. So as you're putting these buildings together, you have to keep in mind, how are you going to score these points? So for an example, we've got, as I mentioned before, we got the police officer for non-adjacent street lights. They're going to score you for 1, it's 5 points, 2 is 9 points, 3 is 15 points. That is a chunk of points. And then, depending on the number of players, you might multiply that. So if you're playing a 4-player game, that's 30 victory points for that. Now that's pretty hard to do. Santa Claus, all 3rd floor cards that have a chimney, 3 victory points. So that is, you could have chimneys on all the buildings. That's going to give you 15. Once again, you do your player modifier. So we've got each pair of curtains that are worth 4 victory points on these as well. We've got the shop owner, different shops that are all on the 1st floor. Once again, all the different victory points. We've got the florist, any 3 horizontally adjacent floor cards. So any 3 buildings that are together, adjacent, you would score 1 for either red or yellow, duh, yeller. Yeah, Old Yeller. You'd score for Old Yeller. You would score for the red or yellow flowers, 1 point. You've got the gardener, who it's the green plants. And now remember, these inhabitants, you can only have one of them. And it even says you cannot receive the same inhabitant twice. Then you got the tourists. And of course, I mentioned the mayor down here. The mayor gives you a victory point for each of the people on the street on the 1st floor. The tourists are actually scoring the house that's above them. So as an example, I'm just going to move these out of the way because I think folks understand how you're going to be getting these floor cards. So as an example here, I've got this building and maybe I'm going to grab a tourist. So I'd be wondering, okay, so which tourist is going to get me the most victory points? And you should be trying to look at 10 or more victory points when you put a character and assign them. So, for an example, even if when I built this and let's say I want the gardener because I have a bunch of plants in adjacent buildings, I would still place them like so when I complete a building. Even if they're not scoring points from this building, maybe I've got all the plants down this way or all whatever, you still need to place your character at the bottom of the building. So if you went with a tourist as an example, I'm just throwing her out there as an example here. then she would be occupying and scoring this building here. Now, the cool thing about the inhabitants and the tourist cards, you flip them over, they tell you exactly what you're going to get. So it's showing for every cat, and there's an arrow pointing up, it'd be 3 victory points. Well, obviously, I would not want this tourist to be occupying this because I only have 1 cat. Now we have tourists that score points for plants, like so. So he would give me 1 victory point for each of the green plants. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's not all that great. So I may not consider going with him. But there's one tourist that's kind of funny because he's kind of a catch-all. So he scores you points for cats, street lights, chimneys, and the curtains as well. So he's actually a pretty good tourist to snag when you've got kind of a hodgepodge of things. So one of the aspects of the game that's I find really interesting is that what you're trying to do is, as you're putting the buildings together, you're trying to kind of balance, you're kind of juggling a little bit, completing the buildings as quickly as you can, but also having a method to the madness of how you're actually putting them together, because you're looking at the most victory points. So the person who completes their 5th building is not necessarily going to be the winner. But if you don't have completed buildings, that's going to kind of mess you up because you're not going to have the tourists to be able to score your points. So once the 5th building is built and everybody's got to take their final turn to make sure that everybody has had a turn in that last round, depending on who's the person who completed their 5th building, you're going to start scoring. So you're going to score each of the characters. You're going to go from left to right through the 5 different characters, be it an inhabitant or a tourist. Then you're going to score your shops. So as we can see, we get 2 victory points for this shop right here. We're going to score our victory points for each of these that we still have, as long as you didn't break one of the rules and have to spend one of those. We're going to score those. And then we're looking at losing points for the closed windows in our completed buildings. And then we total it up. Whoever's got the most victory points is the winner. In case of a tie, it's whoever has the most coins left over is the winner. And of course, if you're still tied after that, then in fact, you know what? Let me double check, because I think the first tiebreaker is most coins and tourists, if I remember correctly. No, that's right. In case of a tie player with the most coins wins. There's still a tie. That's it. The most cats. I was trying to remember what's the other tiebreaker. It is the most cats. So yeah, this game seems really simple, and it is. I mean, it's super easy. It's super easy to learn, but it's actually very interesting, and it can lead to some analysis paralysis because people are trying to figure out, okay, which floors should I be picking? Which tourist or inhabitant should I attract to my building? Who's going to score me the most points? So we did see a little bit of analysis paralysis in this game as people were kind of getting the hang of it. Once you start getting a better feel for how these tourists and inhabitants score you points, then you see a little less analysis paralysis. The AP is not terrible by any stretch of the imagination. The game does play very, very quickly, and we enjoyed it. And we've played back-to-back games. It's one of these games where it's like, wow, I really had a good time, or wow, it was really close. Maybe I won, or someone else won by just 1 or 2 victory points. And it's like, hey, you want to play again? It's like, yeah. So this is a fun, quick playing game. And let me swing on over to the other camera and I will share my final thoughts and give this my review score. There you have a how to play and some of my thoughts on walking in Burano. Allow me to wrap this up with some final thoughts and give the game a final review score. If you couldn't tell during the how to play, I like walking in Burano. I think this is a fun game. I think it's very easy to wrap your head around. May not necessarily be easy to figure out how to score the most points, though, but it is very easy to learn. And it is a nice, quick game, about 20 to 30 minutes, at least when we played 3 and 4 players and knew how to play the game. We zipped through in about 30 minutes per game. Do want to point out you can have a little bit of analysis paralysis, especially trying to figure out, okay, which floor am I going to take? And how should I put these houses together so I can score the most points? I personally did not run into my own analysis paralysis because I was pretty much paying attention what everyone else was doing during the turn so I could kind of game plan. But I did notice that some of the other players around the table did take a little bit of time. So it is possible we could see a touch of AP from some players. Nothing horrible, nothing earth-shattering, and the game does not come to a screeching halt because each player's turn is pretty damn quick. I like the artwork. I think it's very bright. I like the style of the game. I do want to point out the cards are a little thin. And of course, they are smaller cards. So you'll have to get like the Euro-sized card sleeves if you're going to play this quite a bit. I think the $29.99 MSRP is a touch high for this game. Not crazy, but just a little bit. I would definitely recommend if you are going to pick up Walking in Burano and you don't necessarily have a friendly local game store that you are committed to, purchase it online, save a few bucks. It'll definitely be worth it. All in all, I really enjoy it. We played this game more than the 3 plays that I set aside for all my review titles. We enjoyed it that much. It's nothing revolutionary. It's not earth-shattering or anything like that. Doesn't break the mold. But altogether, it's a fun experience. So I give Walking in Burano a very solid 8.4 out of 10 as my review score. That's it for this time. Don't forget, catch me live right here on YouTube Mondays through Fridays at 7 p.m. Central as I bring you the Daily Dope and the latest tabletop gaming news of the day. And of course, if you like this video, give it a quick thumbs up. If you subscribe to the channel, by all means, don't forget, ring that little bell because it will not only notify you when I upload standalone videos like my first looks, my unboxings, my page throughs, and reviews, such as this one, as well as convention coverage and interviews. It'll also let you know when the stream goes live Mondays through Fridays. All right, so I also like to point out, when you're not watching videos on the Gaming Gang channel, please be sure to check out thegaminggang.com. The latest in gaming news, reviews, comics, movies, TV. You probably know the drill by now. Get your geek on at thegaminggang.com. And of course, until next time, happy trails. Zoobadoo-badoo-badoo-boo. Zoobadoo-badoo-badoo-boo. Zabba-dabba-dabba-dabba-bum. Zibba. Whoa, hey. I didn't realize that you were still here. Well, if that's the case, then allow me to share the following information with you that I only have 20 seconds to do. So let's all take a deep breath. So if you would like to subscribe to the Gaming Gang channel, please click right here. If you want to check out the latest episode of the Daily Dope, click right here. And if you'd like to check out a randomly selected standalone video, by all means, click right here. Once again, I'm Jeff McAleer, and thanks for watching.